Hello guys, welcome to our channel. Today we learn about Kubernetes versus Docker. So let's get started. First we start to learn about what is Docker, what is Kubernetes. After that we learn about the difference. So start करते हैं Docker से. So मैं एक real life example लूँगी. So suppose when a software developer working on a project, so he want to test their application on different machine or environment. So in traditional way development, the developer might facing some challenges. So when application doesn't run like smoothly on tester machine, so due to difference like OS differences, dependency or some configurations. So with Docker, developer can create a Docker file which specify all the requirement and dependency needed to the run the application, and Docker files serve as a blueprint of the application environment. So developer then build a Docker image for the Docker file, which include the application and all dependency like packaged together. So now the developer can share the Docker image with the tester, and who can run it as Docker container on their own machine. And because the container include all necessary libraries and settings, so application will run like consistently and reliability, so regardless to underlying the operating system or host machine. So this eliminate the work on my machine problem and make easier collaborate between developer and tester, and ensure smoother development and testing processing. So additional token can be used to deployment scenario. Once the application has been like thoroughly tested in Docker container, the same Docker image can deploy on production server or cloud environment. So like this ensure that application behave like consistently across the like different deployment environment, reducing the risk of configuration related issue. So like in summary, like you can say Docker simplifies the process of developing, testing, deploying the application by providing by standardized like portable containerized environment. So making it valuable tool for software development in day-to-day real life scenario. So that's the Docker. And suppose हम बात करते हैं Kubernetes की. So that is a like specific task that you need to handle Docker cluster environment like scheduling, communication, scalability. Then orchestration tool has been used to handle such tasks. So Kubernetes is a one such platform that is more popular around the globe. Kubernetes is again open source container orchestration platform that is used to manage, automate, and scale containerized applications. So at the Docker Swarm is also orchestration tool. Kubernetes is taken that standard because it is more flexible and more scaling capacity. So it takes primary container responsibility like container deployment, scaling, healing, load balancing of the container. So Kubernetes cluster is working deployment of Kubernetes. This Kubernetes cluster can be seen two different parts, like which are control plane master node and compute machine the worker node. So for the each these node could be like physical or virtual machine, its own like Linux environment, and pods consisting of container are run by each node. Since each node can be physical or like virtual machine, you can manage thousand or like containerized application in different type of environment like physical, virtual, and even hybrid machine with Kubernetes. So to put it simplify, like Kubernetes ensure that each container is in right place and that all of them can work together. It is not the process that define the Kubernetes, but it defined by states. So it makes sure that once it has defined a pod, it keep running always. And in this case, container getting like killed or going down. So that case like Kubernetes attempt to start new one. So Kubernetes is used by companies for automatic the deployment and management and like containerize the application. So like that's it, it's a Kubernetes. So like what will happen like if we are using like we can use Docker Kubernetes together. So in this case we have made like amplify like clear Docker help to you creating a container, and while Kubernetes facilitate that management at runtime. Docker packages and ship the application. Kubernetes help to you to deploy and scale the application. So it can be like both go together once it like needed to the other to work smoothly. Smaller company or even startup like that have lesser number of containers, So they can generally manage them without using Kubernetes. But whenever, in this case, the number of container is large, organization need Kubernetes to manage them. So this is because large companies and the infrastructure is bigger, and the infrastructure become bigger, the number of container also like rise, and it become harder to manage them. So the need of employee Kubernetes arise when Docker and Kubernetes are used together. They act as like facilitator or digital transformations, and this transformation become lots of easier as they serve as a tool more than cloud architecture. So today it has become normal for companies to use Docker and Kubernetes for faster development, deployment, and release of application. Just running the container in production is not enough. They have to be regulated. Like Kubernetes had some really strong features that enable easier regulation of the container. Like these include auto scaling, health check, load balance, all these critical managing the container life cycle like that. Like Kubernetes keep checking the deployment, and that has been done as as per YAML definitions. So like that, although Docker and Kubernetes work better together, it has been strongly recommended that at the time of building like stacks, you should clearly understand the difference between Kubernetes and Docker, because both of them have different scope and can be used separate also. It's seen from like viewpoints of software development. Docker's strong point is development. This means its use container use Docker Hub as an image registry. Kubernetes, on other hand, work really well in operations where you can use existing Docker container, handle its complexity related deployment scaling. Docker is to isolate your container, pack them, but with dependencies. But Kubernetes will help you in the deployment orchestration of this container. But when you use both together, so productivity increase, and so does the confidence of everyone. So organizations use microservices to change their monolithic application into smaller component to so that they can package and develop deploy separately. So, the purpose of these microservices is to help you to deliver more scalable, agile, and strong application that you can update, change, and redeploy for faster way. And this is where tools such as Docker, Kubernetes help companies to do these activity easier and faster way. They provide necessary flexibility of the company deploy scale application necessary. So Docker and Kubernetes spreading rapidly, and more company adopting them. Using them is huge scaling out of production. So company all around the world integrate these two platform of their container and microservices. So what is Docker? Docker is an open source platform for developing and shipping and running application. Docker enable you to separate your application from your infrastructure, so you can deliver software quickly. With Docker, you can manage your infrastructure in same way you can manage your applications. By taking advantage of Docker methodology for shipping, testing, and deploying code quickly, you can signify reduce the delay between writing code and running it in productions, and develop your application as its supporting component using container, and container become the unit of distributing and testing your applications. Docker is isolated, consistent, and portable. Isolated means interference it won't interference with other program running on your computer. Consistent means every time you run a Docker container, it should run the same way. Portables means that a container can be stopped and moved to another with other Docker tools. You can create and share container image, run containers on your laptop or server, even manage container running on multiple servers with Docker Swarm mode. So Docker features and tools. So Docker made it much easier for developers to understand to use container technology by creating some useful features. So there is some features are there. First one is Docker engine, second one Docker container image format, third one Docker file, fourth one Docker hub, Docker compose, and Docker swarm mode. So first one, Docker engine means command line tool Docker. which create and runs container on your computer. And Docker container image formats means for creating and sharing container image, which later become an open standard. Docker file means a language for building container images. Docker Hub means online registry of publishing and sharing container image over the internet. Docker Compose means lightweight way to share container setup instructions. Docker Swarm mode means a tool for managing containers running on multiple servers. The easiest way to start using Docker is to install Docker Desktop, which bundles all of these tools into a program for Windows or Mac. Or if you are a little more familiar with command line, you can install Docker Engine directly into a virtual machine. What you can do with Docker. So there are lots of things that you can do with Docker. Creating container image for your application with Docker build and a Docker file. Run your own container image using Docker engine. Share image with coworkers or other teams by pushing them to private image registry. Share image on internet by pushing them to Docker Hub as a public image registry. Run third-party containers such as database using image pulled from Docker Hub. Run multi-container application with Docker Compose. Along with these useful developer features, there are also like Docker Swarm mode, which is a utility for managing a cluster of Docker instances. Swarm lets you manage container running on many different servers. What is Kubernetes? If Docker run in a way to run container on your laptop, Kubernetes is like a robot that run Docker run on like dozen or hundred or servers. Like Kubernetes server-side software for managing containers. It automates all like time-consuming tasks like creating container and placing them on server, configuration container, check containers health, managing access to resource like memory and CPU. This put it on like category of software called container orchestration tool. Kubernetes hide away from the details of your server. Instead, provide you with the standard API to deploy software like onto the clusters. As developer or like system admin, you don't deploy your container-based app to specific server. You give Kubernetes some instruction and it decide where to pull container images and start the container. Let's study about Kubernetes features. Kubernetes provide a set of primitives. Their primitives are like building blocks of creating app in same way as you might build modern and standard Lego bricks. There are terms you might have heard about like pod, service, and deployment. Kubernetes come with these features: container scheduling, intelligently figuring out like where to place container based on how busy each server is; container management, starting, stopping, and restarting container; auto-scaling container, starting more container when needed. For example, if an app is suddenly experiencing high traffic, Kubernetes can start more container to handle the load. It can also stop those containers afterwards so you are not using resources which are you don't need. Networking, creating and managing network to allow container to communicate with each other and to load balance traffic across several instances on your app. So you could do this yourself, but when you are running 1000 of containers, it gets real tough. Storage, managing access to disk for containers which need to write files, log and monitoring, making it easier to gather logs from container and monitor container health. Security, establish common rules for enforcing security and restriction on container. Plus, Kubernetes is very extensible. You can change the way the network layer work. You can connect with Kubernetes cluster to your cloud account so it can request more resource if needed. You can even use Kubernetes manage like virtual machine as well as a container. Things you can do with Kubernetes. Once you have got Kubernetes cluster up and running, what do you actually do with? Why do people use Kubernetes? Deploy your own container based on applications. Deploy third-party container-based application like database or web application. Connect your apps to each other. Example so that your backend API can talk to the database. Connect many containers together into an architecture of microservices. Upgrade application by stopping existing container and starting new one with the updated software. Gather metrics on your app, for example, memory uses, CPU uses, and so on. Kubernetes is popular because it standardized all of this stuff. We have been doing things like networking log management for a long time, but now there is a standard way to implement these requirements, which pretty much every company has. So comparing Docker and Kubernetes. Now that we have seen what Docker and Kubernetes all are about, what are the difference between them? Docker is a set of tools for building and running containers on your laptop or bunch of servers. Docker Swarm is Docker's tool for managing container on cluster or servers. Kubernetes is tool for deploying managing container on your server or in the cloud. Here we study about difference between Docker, Docker Swarm and Kubernetes. So first we start with Docker. Docker manages group of container in a single host, comes with Docker desktop, work with Docker engine, controls Docker compose, no auto scaling, product from Docker Inc. Docker Swarm mode like manage cluster of instances of Docker engine, built into Docker engine, work with Docker engine, control with Docker Swarm, no auto scaling, product from Docker Inc. Kubernetes manage a cluster of hosts running compatible container runtime standalone project not connected with Dockers and like cloud integration will provide like AWS container can be automatically like scaled if they need more resource. Many distribution available like vanilla Kubernetes, OpenShift, VMware like that. Here's the difference between Kubernetes and Docker Swarm. So Kubernetes complex installation, more complex with like steep learning like curve but more powerful. Support auto scaling, built-in monitoring, manual setup of load balancer, need for separate CLI tool. Instead of Docker Swarm, easier installation, lightweight and easier to learn but limited functionality, manual scaling, need third-party to tool for monitoring, auto load balancer, integrated with like Docker CLI. Thank you friends watching and listening. Bye bye. See you soon.